When I first poured the strange, earthy-smelling liquid into my garden, I didn't expect much. It looked like swamp water, thick, dark, and full of suspended life. But 7 days later, what I saw made me rethink everything I thought I knew about soil health. The plants looked more alive. Their leaves stood upright, the colour deepened, and even the stubborn patch of dry soil that usually repelled water seemed to come back to life. This wasn't fertilizer. It was something older, something the pioneers of regenerative farming swore by. A biodynamic brew made not in a lab, but in the rhythm of the earth itself. And honestly, the result spoke louder than any glossy label ever could. Biodynamics isn't magic. It's disciplined, living science that predates industrial farming. Biodynamics sounds mystical at first. The term often makes people think of esoteric farming circles or half-forgotten European traditions. But the truth is, biodynamics began as one of the earliest organised responses to the destruction caused by chemical agriculture in the early 1900s. Long before organic became a marketing term, farmers in Germany and Austria noticed their fields dying after years of synthetic fertilizer use. Their soil was becoming inert. Crops grew fast but tasted bland and spoiled easily. So, under the guidance of philosopher and scientist Rudolf Steiner, they began rebuilding soil using natural forces, microbial, mineral, and cosmic. At its core, biodynamics treats the farm as a living organism. Every piece, soil, plant, animal, and even the cycles of the moon, works together. The biodynamic brew, often called compost tea or preparation 500, was its beating heart. It wasn't just nutrients, it was life, concentrated and brewed for balance. When I made my first batch, I followed a process that's been unchanged for nearly a century. The base is simple aged cow manure, rainwater and oxygen. The goal isn't to feed plants directly, but to breed beneficial microorganisms, the bacteria and fungi that bring dead soil back to life. I filled a 5-gallon bucket with non-chlorinated water, stirred in compost rich in worm castings and aged manure, and added a small spoon of unsulfured molasses. The sugar acted as food for the microbes. Then, for 7 days, I aerated the mixture by stirring it twice a day, clockwise and counterclockwise, to mimic the natural movement of rivers and air. The smell changed from sharp to earthy, signalling that anaerobic rot had turned into living fermentation. By the 7th day, the liquid had turned the colour of strong coffee with a faint foam on top, a sign of active microbes. That's when I poured it into my watering can and gave my entire garden a soak. The reaction was almost immediate. The first thing I noticed wasn't the plants, it was the soil. After months of struggling with compacted water-resistant patches, suddenly the ground began to absorb moisture evenly. The crumbly texture returned. When I dug in, I could feel the difference between lifeless dust and soil alive with structure. This was microbial action at work. In biodynamic theory, these microbes act as the digestive system of the earth. They break down organic matter into forms plants can actually absorb. When you use chemical fertilizers, you bypass this system entirely, forcing nutrients into the plant while starving the soil of the biological community that sustains it. But when you feed the microbes, they feed everything else. By the 4th day, the plants responded. The leaves grew taut, colours deepened and new growth emerged faster. Even small seedlings that had been struggling started producing true leaves. The change wasn't cosmetic, it was structural. The brew had awakened the underground ecosystem. So, what's actually happening in that first week? It's not a miracle, it's microbiology. The brew contains nitrogen-fixing bacteria, decomposers, and mycorrhizal fungi. When you pour it into your garden, these organisms colonize the rhizosphere, the narrow zone of soil surrounding plant roots. The fungi form symbiotic webs that pull in phosphorus, trace minerals, and moisture, trading them for plant sugars. Bacteria break down organic residues, releasing slow, steady nutrients. Together, they create a living shield against pathogens. Plants grown in this system don't just survive, they become resilient. That's why biodynamic crops often resist drought, disease, and pests without any sprays or additives. When I checked the soil again on day 7, I found fine white fungal threads weaving through the top layer, a telltale sign that the underground world was rebuilding itself. The garden had gone from sterile to alive in less than a week. The best part is, anyone can make this biodynamic brew with almost no cost. Start with good compost or worm castings, something alive with beneficial microbes. Use clean, chlorine-free water, rainwater is ideal, and a small food source like molasses or overripe fruit. Stir daily for aeration, or use an aquarium bubbler if you have one. After a week, strain the liquid and dilute it with 10 parts water before applying it to your garden. For container gardens, pour it gently around the base of plants every week. For large soil beds, apply it every 2 to 3 weeks to keep microbial populations thriving. The key is consistency. Each dose strengthens the living network a little more. Over time, you'll find your soil needs less watering, fewer amendments, and produces stronger, more nutrient-dense crops. This is what biodynamics teaches. When you restore life to the soil, everything else follows. Using the brew changed more than my soil. It changed how I viewed the entire growing process. You know, modern gardening tends to treat the earth like a machine, something to be manipulated with products and schedules. But biodynamics returns it to its rightful place as a living partner. You don't force growth, you cooperate with it. This philosophy also reminds us how connected we are to natural cycles. In traditional biodynamic practice, planting, composting and brewing often follow lunar phases. While many dismiss that as superstition, the underlying logic is simple. Observe nature's rhythms, don't fight them. When your actions align with those patterns, temperature, moisture, and microbial timing, results come naturally. 7 days after pouring that brew, my garden didn't just look better. It felt balanced. The soil smelled richer, the plants thrived without stress, and I hadn't added a single grain of synthetic fertilizer. The proof was right there, alive and growing. If you care about real soil health and want to see your garden come alive without chemicals or gimmicks, try this biodynamic brew yourself. Start small, stay consistent, and watch how quickly nature responds when you feed the living world instead of fighting it. For more time-tested growing methods that bring ancient agricultural wisdom into today's gardens, Make sure to subscribe to Hydrohaven. Share this guide with anyone who still believes soil needs factory-made nutrients to grow. The truth is simpler, older, and far more powerful. When you bring life back to your soil, it gives life back to everything you grow.